Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving headfirst into the high-stakes world of the ICU. We're going to crack the code on how medical detectives are battling these super deadly infections that target the most vulnerable patients.
All right, picture this. You've got a patient in the ICU. They're on life support, but they've been stable for days. And then, all of a sudden, they just tank. Their oxygen needs go through the roof. For the doctor at the bedside, this is a code red moment. And the big question is, why? Is it a new deadly pneumonia setting in? Or is it something else entirely, like fluid in the lungs, a blood clot, who knows?
For the longest time, diagnosing what we call ventilator-associated pneumonia, or VAP, was kind of like old-school detective work. Doctors had to rely on these really subjective clues. A blurry chest x-ray, which, let's be honest, in a critically ill patient is super hard to read, or just a gut feeling that the patient looks worse. This made diagnoses pretty inconsistent, and it was almost impossible to get a real handle on how big this problem actually was.
But that's all changing. Now, there's this powerful data-driven approach called ventilator-associated events, or VAE. And what this does is it swaps out those fuzzy impressions for cold, hard data, coming straight from the ventilator itself. It's a game changer, giving everyone a standardized playbook to investigate exactly when and why a patient's breathing is getting worse.
So, the whole investigation kicks off with Tier 1. It's called a ventilator-associated condition, or VAC. Just think of it like the first smoke alarm going off. It's triggered automatically when the ventilator's data shows that a patient's need for oxygen has jumped up and stayed up for at least a couple of days. All it's saying at this point is, hey, something is definitely wrong with the lungs.
Okay, so the alarm's gone off. Now the algorithm starts to narrow down the suspects. If that same patient with a VAC also starts showing classic signs of infection, we're talking fever, weird white blood cell counts, and the doctors start them on a new antibiotic, then boom, the event gets upgraded to an IVAC. This is our first real solid clue that an infection might be the culprit here.
And that brings us to the final piece of the puzzle, Tier 3, possible VAP, or PVAP. This is where the detective gets the smoking gun. An IVAC becomes a PVAP only when a lab test, like a culture from deep in the respiratory tract, comes back positive. It actually identifies the specific bug causing all the trouble. So we've gone from a general alarm to having our prime suspect in custody.
Now, having this toolkit is absolutely crucial, because when we shift our focus to a place like India, well, the villains in this story get a whole lot bigger, a whole lot badder, and they are way more common. The situation in Indian ICUs is a whole different ballgame, driven by these incredibly drug-resistant superbugs.
And just to give you an idea of the sheer scale of this problem, get this. In the US, hospitals might see a VAE rate of, say, 1 to 4 for every 1,000 days a patient is on a ventilator. But in some studies from India, that rate skyrockets to nearly 22. That is 5 to 10 times higher. This isn't just a statistic, folks. It's a full-blown crisis hitting the most vulnerable people.
So when the investigators zoom in on the culprits, it's like a most wanted list. The same group of usual suspects pops up time and time again. We're talking about 3 particularly nasty types of bacteria: Acinetobacter, Klebsiella, and Pseudomonas. These 3 are responsible for the vast majority of these life-threatening infections.
And the number one public enemy on that list? Acinetobacter baumannii. Doctors are terrified of this bug. They literally call it a therapeutic nightmare because of its uncanny ability to shrug off almost every antibiotic we throw at it. Once it gets a foothold, it is incredibly hard to get rid of.
Okay, hold on to your hats for this next number, because it is truly staggering. Carbapenems. These are the big guns, the powerful last resort antibiotics we use when nothing else works. In India, a mind-blowing 91% of Acinetobacter infections are now resistant to them. Let that sink in. For more than 9 out of every 10 patients with this bug, one of our strongest weapons is completely useless.
So what does this all mean? It means when these superbugs strike, the consequences are absolutely devastating. The data is grim. For patients in India who develop one of these ventilator-associated events, the mortality rate can climb as high as 58%. This isn't just a complication of being in the ICU anymore. For many, it's a death sentence.
So when you're facing down enemies this deadly, where your treatment options are so limited and the stakes are literally life and death, the best strategy isn't to fight back. It's to stop the crime before it even happens. The entire focus has to shift from treatment to aggressive, relentless prevention.
And the heart of this defensive strategy is something called the VAP Prevention Bundle. It's not just one thing, it's a whole system, a 4-part plan to build a fortress around the patient. We're talking about simple but critical steps: keeping the patient's head propped up,
constant oral care to keep bacteria down, using special tubes to suction out nasty secretions, and making sure that breathing tube cuff has a perfect seal. Every single detail matters.
But you know the single most effective defense strategy of all? It's actually really simple. The less time a patient is on a ventilator, the lower their risk. Period. Getting patients off that machine, breathing on their own again, as fast and as safely as humanly possible, that is the #1 goal. It's the ultimate preventative medicine.
But let's be real, sometimes, even with the best defenses in the world, a superbug breaks through the lines. And when that happens, you can't just grab any old antibiotic off the shelf. You need a smart, clever counterattack, one that's specifically designed for the enemy you're up against.
And in this kind of fight, the old playbook just doesn't work. The traditional idea of start low, go slow with antibiotics, that's a recipe for disaster. It's too slow. Against these superbugs, the strategy is hit hard and hit fast with the right powerful drugs right from the get-go. It's the only way to give the patient a fighting chance.
So for these superbugs that have like multiple layers of armor, clinicians are using this brilliant synergy tactic. Take a bug called NDM-producing Klebsiella. It has all these different shields that block our best drugs. So the tactic is to use a 1-2 punch. The first drug, CZAI, basically acts like a shield breaker. It disables one of the bug's key defenses, and that creates an opening for the second drug, aztreonam, to slip past the defenses and deliver the final lethal blow. It's genius.
And this isn't just theory, it really works. There was this real-world case. A patient was getting worse on day 10. The lab test came back, and the infection was resistant to almost everything, even that new CZ drug. But then a molecular test found the NDM gene. That was the crucial clue. So the doctors went with the 1-2 punch, CZ plus aztreonam. And guess what? The patient made a full recovery and got off the ventilator. It's an incredible save.
So, what's the big takeaway here? Winning this war against superbugs isn't about finding one single magic bullet. It's just not that simple. Success comes from a relentless, two-pronged attack. On one hand, you have meticulous, obsessive prevention to build that fortress around the patient. And on the other, you have smart, precision-guided medicine to fight back when the walls are breached.
And this all leaves us with a really critical question for the future. We're coming up with these brilliant new tools and strategies to fight the scariest bacteria on the planet. But as our medical detectives get smarter, we have to get smarter too. We have to become better guardians of these precious, life-saving drugs to make sure we don't lose them for good.